Recently, I roasted over 40 kilos of a Papua New Guinea coffee on this coffee roaster back here. It's a half a kilo roaster, 500 gram. In this video, I'm going to be roasting that same coffee on the Hive. Stick around. All right, thanks for joining me today and welcome to the Virtual Coffee Lab. I've been enjoying this Papua New Guinea coffee. We've bought a 60 kilo bag. My son and I have been doing a special project. 99% of that has been fulfilled. We've been able to have some leftover coffee, and I'm going to be roasting on some of the different coffee roasters that I have here at home. The first one I decided to do was the Hive. This is a great roaster. Some of you may not be familiar with the Hive. In its simplest form, it is kind of like a skillet with a dome on it. It is a stainless steel pan that has a special design, and you can see on the inside what this is shaped like. And it has a screen with a center like a donut, and that allows heat to not only heat on the lower side of this Hive roaster, but it also allows heat to come up through the screen and into the dome while it's roasting, and that heat circulates. So you've got a really interesting way that this heat stays within the roaster, and the smoke, basically this heat it gets hot enough in here where the chaff will incinerate, so you get these really fine, dark, small pieces of chaff that are left over rather than a ton of chaff floating all over the place. And you can get some great roasts on this. As a matter of fact, take a look at this shot here. This is the end roast of the Hive. It is a fairly even roast, and that has been my experience when I use this roaster, is that it gives me really consistent, even colored roasts where possible. I mean, there's some coffees that have different moisture levels within the batch you're roasting. Like a dry process coffee, you'll see variations in color. But you can see that it's fairly consistent here in this roast. It's very similar to the outcome of the drum roaster. So I'm really happy about that. So we're going to be roasting on the Hive, but instead of using the base Hive, and I forget the name of the base Hive, you should look, and I'll put a link in the description for Hive Coffee Roasters website. You can check out their products. I bought this is mine, but this is the base model, and they have a digital dome which is next, and that's basically the same base unit along with this digital top. And this digital top has a probe in it, and you can see the wire here, and it connects to this digital readout display. It shows the temperature. You can order it in Celsius or Fahrenheit, and it plugs into basically like a phone charging USB connector that plugs into the wall. So that's what powers this. It's really convenient. It's easy to use, and you're going to see in this video where the temperature is displayed. And that is really important because we, as coffee roasters, we know that time over temperature is what it's all about. We're going to be monitoring the temperature of our beans as they increase over time. And in order to craft great coffee, we have an opportunity to have our coffee work through the total roast in phases or in sections. So the dry phase, that very beginning section of the roast where the coffee first starts roasting and it turns yellow. It takes a little while for it to turn yellow. And then that's the dry phase. From the yellow to first crack is the middle phase or the browning phase. Some call it the Maillard phase. And then the development phase, or that last phase, is from first crack until you drop the coffee. And we're going to use the temperatures and time to work through these phases and craft some great coffee. As a matter of fact, we're going to use the profile that I used with this drum roaster right here. And we're using the same total roast time, the very similar drop temperature. We'll talk about temperatures along the way here during the roast, and charge temperature as well is going to be different. But the first crack time, the dry time, and the drop time, all of those are going to match what we did here on the drum roaster. And we're going to see how that tastes compared to what we did on my Mill City 500 gram roaster. First, you're going to see this in the video. This is my cheat sheet. I took the profile that I worked through on this drum roaster, and just what I shared with you, the dry end time, the first crack time, the drop time, and the temperatures, and I basically charted where my temperatures would be every 30 seconds. So I'm using this as a guide to help me follow and stay on track as I'm using the Hive. I'm roasting 160 grams of the Papua New Guinea coffee. This is the same coffee that we used on the previous roast. It is a fairly high density coffee, and it is a wash coffee. There's my cheat sheet. You can see, and I've got my notes, and I'm going to set that down right in front of me so I can follow along. And you can see the digital display of the Hive as it's warming up. I do a preheat to about 365-ish degrees. When I turn the gas off or the flame down and I reach that point, it's still climbing a little bit, but then I'll start adding the beans and the temperature will start dropping. So the temperature right now is going to work its way up to about 365 degrees when I'll start to put the beans in the roaster. I'm using natural gas here on the stove, and I do use a couple of different heat adjustments. It's mostly low up to medium on the flame for like your home gas, or if you're using like a camping stove. And you'll just have to kind of figure out the right flame height for you to use in order to have your temperatures follow along with your profile. So there's going to be two techniques that we're going to be using here. One is to adjust the flame size, the amount of heat. The other is the elevation of the Hive away from the heat. That's how we're going to control our timing throughout the roast. So you're going to see me take this roaster and you're going to see me raise it up and have it higher or lower. As a matter of fact, I want to apologize ahead of time that the roaster is kind of partly out of the picture during a lot of the roast because I've elevated it. All right, so I reached the temperature of 375 degrees, 365, 375. I've put the beans in, had a couple stragglers. All right, the timer has been set, and you'll notice that I start to move the Hive. That's really important. Keeping the beans moving is really important. There is a couple of seconds like here where I stop shaking the roaster, and that's not a good thing. You want to keep that moving because that roaster was 370 degrees. Notice the temperature dropping on the Hive. We're going to experience turning point here on the Hive as the temperature bottoms out around 220, 225 degrees. And that's going to take a minute or two to be able to do that. And so we have kind of the same concept going on with a normal roast where the cool beans are put into the roaster. The bean temperature seems to be dropping. The temperature of the beans seem to be dropping. In reality, we know they're not because the bean temperatures, the temperature of the beans is room temperature, and so it's always increasing, but it's the probe. It's the information that the probe is delivering. The probe was hot, and now it's being cooled by the room temperature beans. All right, so we're getting close to turning point here. We're about a minute and 20 seconds into the roast, and I think we're going to bottom out around 222 degrees, and then that's going to slowly turn around and start to climb. Our target for dry is about 5 minutes and 15 seconds. That's what we've been doing on the drum roaster, so I'm going to try to do that here and emulate that here with the Hive. You'll notice that, as I mentioned earlier, I'm using different flame heights, and I'm using different heights for the roaster. You just saw me lower the roaster closer to the flame, and that's because I want to get this heat to start to move these temperatures up. The Hive is like a Ferrari. You can quickly change the temperature within this roaster, and so after a few times using this, you kind of get a feel for it. You get a feel for where you want to set the height of the Hive, but you're constantly keeping it moving. All right, we are on our way up. We're at about 2 minutes and 20 seconds. At 2:30, I want to be around 2:45, and you'll see that I'm about 5 degrees short, but I'm catching up. So if there's 2:30, I'm 3 degrees short of my time. Our next event is 3 minutes, and that's going to be 264 degrees. So I'm watching the temperature, I'm watching the pace of the temperature climb, and I'm moving the hive, adjusting the flame, and I'm also adjusting the height of this roaster. Why did I choose this profile? Well, you can check out my last video and you can see why I did that. We roasted quite a few different roasts, up to 8 or 9 different roasts on this roaster with different profiles to find a sweet, flavorful coffee that would please everyone. It's a full-body coffee, very delicious. We sent this coffee out to the clients, people that they wanted it sent to, and the response was really, really good. We got some great feedback. They were very happy with the end result. Okay, we're at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and that's about 282 degrees is my target, and I'm just a couple degrees off from that. So basically I'm on track. I'm on track to reach my goal of my dry time of 5 minutes and 15 seconds. Around 345 degrees is my estimated target temperature for dry end. We're approaching 4 minutes, and I should be at 301. So I'm lagging behind just a tiny bit, 4 minutes, so I'm about 2 degrees behind. So that's good enough. I mean, I'm in a safe place. I'm feeling good about the progress of this roast. Depending upon the coffee you roast, you may want to use a different profile. I did a video taking control of your roaster, and I used the Hive, and I went through and talked about putting together a worksheet like this, and I'm doing the same thing here as I did in that video, where I'm following my own profile in my temperatures every 30 seconds. So we are at 435 right now, and we should have been at 319, so we're maybe just a degree or two ahead. We're doing really well. We're still on track. Got about 30 seconds before we should be reaching dry end. Again, I want to apologize for not having the whole roaster in the video. So I'm looking inside the Hive right there, checking the color out, just making sure that I'm on track, and we're at 5:15 right about now, and it's dry. All right, so we are right on track, and our next target is going to be first crack. First crack event time is going to be 8 minutes and 30 seconds. So we've got 3 minutes right now before we're going to get to first crack. And so our average rate of rise during the dry phase was a rate of rise of 30. So what I did was I took my temperature, my turning point, the lowest, what I thought the lowest temperature was going to be at turning point, and I took my dry time, my dry end temperature, and the difference was the total difference the total difference divided by 5 minutes and 15 seconds gives me a rate of rise of about 30. When we move into this middle phase here, my average rate of rise is going to be 12. So we're slowing the roast down, giving this roast a chance to spend 3 minutes at least in the middle phase, allowing the flavor development. I've got a video, 3 tips for new home coffee roasters, you can check out up here, and that highlights these 3 phases and the importance of each phase and what happens in each phase. I also did a video that's really popular, how to roast sweet and flavorful coffee, and that, again, that'll be up here in the corner. You can check out. That is dealing with this middle phase and the development phase to give you a great cup of coffee. All right, we're approaching 7 minutes on our roast. Our target temperature is 373, which we are at right now, so I am spot on. Now, one of the things I noticed, and this is really interesting, when we're roasting coffee, coffee is basically, as it heats up, it is evaporating. The moisture is evaporating in the bean. And so when that happens and we reach dry and then we get into this next phase, heat is still being applied. There's still moisture in the bean. And when the bean gets closer to first crack, it starts to give off heat. It starts to go exothermic. So we'll have these little dips or crashes and flicks that occur, and that's because the bean starts to give off heat, and at first crack you actually hear that audible sound, that audible crack. We're 45 seconds away from first crack. At 8 minutes, our target temperature is 385, and we're going to be there in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Bam, 385. We're right on track, and our first crack temperature should be around 390. We're going to get some outliers. You might be able to hear a couple cracks and snaps. That's okay, but I want to know that crack is really starting, and then we'll mark it. There we go. And first crack. We hit first crack. Okay, so we are within a degree of what I had planned to be first crack, so we're on track, and now our rate of rise average is going to be 7.5 for this development phase. That means that I have to slow the roast down even more. Nice, slow rolling crack. I'm carefully monitoring my heat to make sure that I don't speed up or slow down and flatten in my roast here. So I know that there's one point where it flattens a little bit for 15 or 20 seconds. The temperature really doesn't change much, and then but we want to avoid that. Ideally, that's what we're trying to avoid. We're consistently lowering or dropping the rate of rise through the roast process after dry. So we're at 9:30 right now, and we're going to be dropping this coffee in 45 seconds. 397 was our 9:30 temp, and here's where I've got to back off, and I lowered my heat. I'm raising the hive because I really want to drag this out right here. But I'm going to drop this coffee because I don't want it to stay in this roaster and get too hot. 403 was my temp. I turned the gas off. 403 was my planned drop temp. Now, as soon as I flip this upside down and start shaking the coffee out, you'll notice that the temperature starts to pop up on the digital display. I don't know, that's maybe because the beans aren't necessarily touching the probe anymore and it's just exposed to the hot air. Okay, so that's the roast. I took the coffee outside for a couple of minutes in that cooling tray. It's very cold here where I live right now. On the day that I roasted this, outside temperature was about 0 Celsius or 32 degrees, 30 degrees. So the coffee is going to cool here real quick. But if you take a look at these beans, they're really consistent. The color is consistent. Temperature is a couple degrees higher than what I was doing here on the drum roaster. It seemed like the hive may be a couple degrees off from my temperatures on this roaster, and so that was my way of compensating to try to attain the same profile. All right, we weighed this coffee. Weight loss was about 14.3%, so slightly higher than what we were doing on the drum roaster, and that could be because of that higher temperature. I could have been wrong on what I thought the temperature differences were between the hive and what I was getting on my roaster here, but it's still pretty close to our 13.8 to 14.1 or 2 is what our range was when we were doing coffee here on our big project. So overall, very happy. Timing wise, everything matched. For using a roaster like we're using here and with the setup that we're using, that is something I guess I'm really happy with the end result. So now it comes down to tasting the coffee. I roasted this coffee a few days ago. I brewed it this morning, and it was a really good cup of coffee. Was it exactly the same as what we roasted here on this roaster? The answer is no. So the coffee I did on the hive, the body wasn't quite as heavy. It was kind of a medium-bodied coffee, and it didn't have as It didn't have all of the sweetness that we were getting out of the drum roaster, and I think my suspicions are that one, it was a little bit darker than the other roasts, just hardly, but just a little bit. And the other is that my rate of rise, I did have a couple of flat spots, and I think that may have affected the overall flavor of the coffee. Most people would never be able to detect it, but I'm drinking coffee from the roast we've been doing here, and then I compared that with the roast that we did on the Hive, and there were some subtle differences. Was it a big difference? No, it wasn't. So the end result is a great roast with the Hive. If you are not familiar or have never used the Hive, I would highly encourage it. It's such a popular roaster. There's a lot of people that are using it. It's great for smaller roasts just to kind of play around with. It's easy to use, and it's not expensive at all. So check out the link on my description here. Takes you to the Hive Roaster website. But what's the takeaway from this video? One is you can buy a fairly inexpensive roaster, a hand roaster that you can take anywhere with you and roast some fresh coffee, and you can craft that coffee any way you want with this roaster. Sky's the limit. It's a great roaster. I would highly recommend it. The other takeaway is that you can experiment with a roaster like this in a smaller batch. This is 160 grams compared to maybe a larger roaster. So if you've got a larger roaster and you want to experiment, the Hive is a great roaster to do that with. The other takeaway from this is the profile itself. Taking that profile from the drum roaster and applying it to the Hive. Was it exactly the same? No, it wasn't exactly the same, but it was pretty close. And from there, we could tweak it. We could change the total roast time a little bit, maybe lengthen it a little bit, or shorten it a little bit, and see how that affects the taste. That's what we did with the drum roaster. We started with a standard profile that we use for a lot of our roasts, and then from there we tweak it. We changed the drop total roast time. We changed the end drop temperature. We fiddle with each of these different settings to see how that influences the taste. And some of these changes are very subtle. It might be a 15-second difference in the total roast time. It may be 2 or 3 degrees in your drop temperature when you drop the coffee. And these will all impact flavors. Same thing with the first crack time. What time do you reach first crack? Whether it's at 8 minutes, 8:15, 8:30, 9 minutes, or even shorter than that. There's a lot of people that are roasting faster than that. All of these variables will influence how your coffee tastes. So I would recommend a roaster like this. Experiment with the roasters that you have if you have one. And I'm not sure which roaster we're going to be using next. We've got the Popper, the SR540 Fresh Roast, a little ceramic roaster, the B-More. We're going to be pulling all of those out to do these roasts. So I hope that you stick around and see those. If this is the type of content that you like, hit the like button now. Subscribe to my channel so you'll be notified when my new videos come out. And I appreciate you guys watching this video. Share your comments. Ask your questions. If you saw something I did in the video that you have questions about, ask. If you have questions about the Hive, I can try to answer some of those, or you can reach out to Matt at Hive Roasters. And again, the link will be in the description. And if you've got some suggestions, tricks with the Hive, if you own one, something I should be doing different, share that. I'd love to hear those comments. And just participate in the conversation. My other videos on the site all have interactions. People are sharing and they're asking questions, and I'm responding, other people are responding. So there's a lot of great resources for you here at the Virtual Coffee Lab. So thanks for joining me today. I hope you guys have a great week roasting, and we'll see you next time. Take care.